What's going on there, folks? Good evening. It is the Earthmaster out here on this Friday night, December 29th, 2023. It is about 9:31 p.m. here, California time. Latest activity shows a 5.6 here off the coast of northern Sumatra. Decent sized earthquake there at the northern edge of the Java Trench. Looks like that's coming in about 25 kilometers deep. Activity right now really ramping up across the Kīlauea Volcano on the big island of Hawaii. Got about 50 earthquakes or so, at least according here to the USGS, within the last 24 hours. Most of this earthquake activity struck since about, I'd say about 5 o'clock or so. We've seen an elevated event out here across the Kīlauea Volcano. It is currently not erupting, but it could be getting close to erupting here. Looking at, a pretty significant earthquake activity event here. Very shallow earthquake activity just below the surface. Could see fissure activity open up potentially tonight or maybe even tomorrow. Maybe even right now while I'm doing the update. The USGS did put out a information statement here on the Kīlauea Volcano. Let me go back here and make sure I got the most recent update here. Stand by for a second. HVO. Yeah, they put out just a information statement on this activity. So the current situation is that it's not erupting, not yet. Elevated unrest and increased seismicity to the south of the Kilauea summit started today. Of course, today, December 29th, at around 1:10 p.m. Hawaii time, and is continuing to this hour. The seismicity followed a sharp increase in the rate of inflation on the Sand Hill tilt meter that began about 12:30 p.m. Hawaii time and is continuing. The seismic activity south of the crater area has progressively included a larger region to the south of the caldera, about 2 to 4 kilometers south of the crater, 1 to 2.5 miles just south of the crater. This seismicity is occurring at about 1 to 3 kilometers. That's very shallow, with magnitudes ranging from about 2.5 or less. There have been about 80 located earthquakes in the region in the past 6 hours and many smaller earthquakes. So we are looking at elevated inflation here, obviously, right? Elevated earthquake activity. I've been chatting about this for a little bit. I believe we're going to see maybe some older areas here to the south of the region show some fissure activity soon, very soon, because these are getting very shallow in terms of the earthquake activity. That means magma is on the move and getting ready to bust through to the surface. Not a whole lot across the Kilauea crater area. That's where we've seen the majority of our last eruptions, right? Been confined to the crater, filling up the lava lake. Back in 2018, we had activity outside of the Kilauea crater area around the Lanali Estates. I believe we're going to see activity pop off right around here, around the southwest rift zone here, where we've seen most of the earthquake activity. Their statement stating that eruptive activity could pop up with little or no warning. And I did mention earlier in my update that we would see a sharp rise in earthquake activity prior to any fissure activity opening up. Now, whether this activity is enough to, qualify as a possible eruption, far as a warning to an eruption, we'll have to see how this behaves. I mean, I think we'll see a little bit more earthquake activity before that happens. The most recent eruption at Kilauea Summit ended on the 16th of September this year, but was followed by a significant intrusion event to the southwest of the Kilauea caldera. Seismicity has been kind of up and down, alternating between the southwest area and the south end of the caldera in the upper east rift zone. Let's see what we got here on this little map. There we go. We can pretty much see the area of inflation out here, right across this area, southwest rift zone right here. There's a center of the uplift. Most of the earthquake activity right here in the southwest rift zone. So that, like I'm saying, I'm believing here, at least in my judgment, that we should see activity stir up here south of the crater area. Should see some fissure activity open up here close to the 1974 eruptive vents out here, right? Somewhere within this area. That's where most of the earthquake activity has been. That's where it looks like, at least in my judgment, we could see activity open up. I don't think we're going to see a Kilauea crater lava lake eruption again. I think it's going to be south of here. So earthquake swarms like this can precede eruptions, but there is no lateral or upward migration of the earthquakes. Let's look at this here. Let's look at these the depth of these earthquakes. This is very shallow activity. Now, I'm not for sure when they put out this update. Pretty recent, but we're getting some very shallower earthquake activity here in the last hour or so, indicating migration upwards towards the surface. Exactly what they said isn't happening. There's a 2.0, very shallow earthquake there. So this is just below the surface. The majority of these, yeah, they look like around 1.5 to 1 kilometer or so below the surface, but we are seeing that shallower earthquake activity that they're saying that we're not seeing. But it's definitely happening. There are currently no signs of an imminent eruption. Well, I guess we'll see, right? But the volcano's summit region remains unsettled with a high level of inflation and continued seismic activity. We'll continue to watch that, obviously, right, and report back on it. Those links there, USGS, are offline, FYI. This one's working, it looks like, but that previous update, or this previous S2 cam is offline. Look at that. Click on it, and the lost bison out there in the ocean of, I'm not for sure what city that is. Maybe Hawaii, I'm guessing. I've never been to Hawaii, so I don't know. So, let's look at the inflation activity. We've been watching that rise up time and time again here over the past couple months, ever since the last eruption there back in September. We've been seeing elevated inflation event after inflation event. This is the last 2 days, a pretty sharp rise here in the inflation, indicating magma on the move, magma moving around down there. We are currently at the highest level of inflation right here since 2018. So that tells you something, that we're building up quite a bit of potential volume of magma down here in the southwest rift zone here, south of the caldera area. As you can see here on the map, most of the earthquake activity in this region here. Not a whole lot across the lava lake area of the summit region down here south. So I think we may see something open up here soon, very soon. The UWE station here shows that, again, that dramatic uprise here in the last couple hours. There is a station here. I think this is a Sand Hill station that they're talking about. Still seeing some uptick here on that monitoring station that's showing inflation activity. I wish all of these were working. We could be looking at numerous different stations out here, but they're not all functionable in terms of the GPS. Earthquake activity, definitely seen that one does not work. Somebody needs to remove that station off the network because that doesn't show anything at all. Nada. Zip zero. This activity, though, right here is magma fluid movement that showed up here around noon or so. And we've been seeing earthquake activity since then. So things are on the move. A lot of earthquake activity ramping up here. Now, whether we see this eruption start up tonight, tomorrow, I don't know. But the longer this earthquake, I think the longer this earthquake activity triggers there, just south of the caldera region, the more likelihood that we're going to see fissure activity open up out there for sure. Let me back out here. I know they posted a couple links to a couple sites there, a couple websites, webcams, but they need to get this stuff fixed. Look at this image from 2000 this year, but back in the 9th of December. I mean, really, come on. Who's behind all this stuff? Who's in charge, right, is the question. Not seeing any visible magma, lava at the caldera region. We'll continue to watch that, though. I think we will know. This earthquake activity could be a sign here of things getting ready to get interesting there across the Kīlauea volcano. So we're continuing to watch that. I do have a hot cave station up here. Hot Caves Hawaii sits roughly south here, across the southwest rift zone down here. So that is picking up earthquake activity when it does come in. A little bit of earthquake activity kicking up there right now. So just be on guard. Looks like that volcano may be kicking up here once again very, very soon. The other volcano up in Iceland, well, let's go check it out, see what's going on here in terms of earthquake activity and whatnot. Only 19 earthquakes here in the last 12 hours. Most of that over here across this rift zone. Well away from the Grindavik area, right? This has made a lot of world news here recently. Goodness, been a hot topic out here on YouTube. Not a whole lot of earthquake activity out here right now. That could, that's good news, right? For now. Doesn't mean we're out of the woods in terms of the potential eruption out here. The latest update here from the Iceland folks does state that they are concerned and worried about an increased probability of a new eruption. They're really uncertain, though, onto where exactly it's going to take place. But obviously, we'll see elevated earthquake activity out here prior to any fissure activity opening up. And I think we had about a 60 to 90 minute time frame between elevated earthquake activity and that fissure activity opening up. So hopefully, hopefully it just stays away from the town down here, but it's still questionable on if we're going to see that fissure activity open up across the Grindavik area. It's still likely. All right, let's look at the rest of the map here. There's that 5 point. Ooh, did they raise it up? Wasn't that just a 5.6 on the Earthquake 3D globe? Yeah. Looks like they raised it up here to a 5.9 just off the coast here in the Cocos Basin. Now, this is a major seismically active area. Of course, the Sumatra earthquake, I remember that. That was a big earthquake. I want to look at history out here real quick. We'll do a little history in terms of the last big earthquake out here. I think I know when it was, but I just want to go back here a little bit and see what we got, because this area can see some big time earthquakes, and it's been a little while since we've seen any significant earthquake activity out here across the Sumatra area. That area is a major subduction zone here along the Java Trench. Well, so 329 earthquakes of 6.0 and above since historical records. The largest magnitude, remember that? Goodness, how can we forget, right? That was a huge, large, damaging earthquake with a large subsequent tsunami that traveled across the Indian Ocean here. A lot of folks know that, 2004. I remember that very well. The last earthquake, at least in terms of large magnitudes here, there was a 7.1 this year in the Sumatra area. A couple sixes, but I'm kind of looking at stuff above the 6 range. 6.9, a little bit further south along the Java Trench. Couple other 6s in this area. Go down here a little bit and see 7.8. That was way offshore. Goodness, a 7.8 way out here? Wow, that's a little crazy. 6.4, 8.2. That earthquake was off here as well in the Cocos Basin. That's a little concerning, because that kind of tells me that there's quite a bit of strain out here against the subduction zone itself. There's another 8.6. What's going on out there in the Cocos Basin? Goodness, a lot of stuff. So yeah, it's hard to say exactly, if we're overdue for some larger activity, because this is all over the place in terms of the these large magnitudes and the locations of these earthquakes. Definitely, I would definitely want to keep an eye on this area here with this back building out here, 5.9. For now it's a 5.9, but definitely keep an eye on this area of the northern edge of the Java Trench. Obviously, it's a major player in some huge earthquakes. Looking at the rest of the Pacific out here, where'd all the earthquakes go? Goodness. There's some smaller quake activity out here, but things have gone kind of quiet across the Western Pacific and even the Indonesia Islands area. I know this is still seeing some 2s and 3s across here, but normally this is super cluttered. This is very minimal activity with looks like this wants to advance here across the area in terms of momentum. Keep an eye on that region. Not a whole lot going on across the New Zealand area. Got some earthquake activity in the Kermadec Trench. 5.1 earlier into the South Pacific Ocean. That earthquake fairly new. We've seen a couple earthquakes out here recently in the last couple days. Alaska not looking too active up here. A couple smaller 2s and some smaller quakes as typical up here in this zone. This major subduction zone. Very quiet though, looks like. Goodness, what's going on here? Yellowstone National Park, a couple smaller volcanoes as mentioned earlier in my update this morning. Let me give a quick glance here and see what we got. There's some of that earthquake activity in the west boundary region. Showed up pretty nicely here earlier this morning. Looks like recent activity confined here across the Mary Lake area. Going to be centered, well, there's a little bit down there in the Pitchstone Plateau as well. So somewhat elevated earthquake activity out here across the Yellowstone region. Nothing big. These are all very small earthquakes, but the USGS not really doing a whole lot of reporting on those quakes. They only showed some of these smaller quakes there from earlier, from 6 o'clock this morning, but we've seen quite a bit more since then. But it is Friday, right? Got to get out of the office real quick. Northern California, a lot of rain falling out here. Goodness, I picked up almost 1.5 inches of rain just today here at my place outside of Chico. Quite the heavy rain coming in here. It doesn't look like it stirred up too much in terms of fault activity. A little small earthquake activity across the Long Valley supervolcano. And Southern California, not a whole lot of activity. Aside from a 3-pointer down here off the... it's still in the Sierra Nevada mountains here near Bodfish. 3.5. Very shallow here off of this fault system, the Kern Gorge Fault outside of Bakersfield. A few folks did report feeling that 3-pointer out there in Southern California region, but it doesn't really look like too much activity stirring up out here right now. Let me check out the Tremor, see what we have for Cascadia Tremor. Got 0, nada, zip 0. This has been the trend here. Kind of like the, hard to compare it to stuff, but we're looking at very minimal tremor activity here. And what it means, well, that's a good question. Obviously, it's been 323, almost 324 years since the last full rupture out here of the Cascadia subduction zone. The last 9-pointer, at least I think it was a 9-pointer, maybe greater. Pretty damaging earthquake. If that were to happen today, well, that's a big one. That's kind of a life-changing event out here across the area of the Pacific Northwest and anywhere else across the Pacific where a subsequent tsunami would take place. Tremor activity, I believe, plays a major part in hopefully predicting the next mega quake out here. It's acting a little odd here recently with the last major tremor event back in October of last year. We've only seen a handful of medium-sized tremor events since then. Prior to that, we've seen these regular intervals of elevated tremor. So, not for sure what that means. Hopefully, we can use this data to study and maybe even predict the next megaquake activity out here following the one that could be coming up here. It could happen tonight, could happen tomorrow. No telling when, but it's a good idea to be prepared out here across the area. Pacific Northwest knows about it. I mean, there's... I can't say everyone knows about it because I've seen it myself. throughout the Oregon area. So I hope everyone gets informed on the potential out there. Not to be scared, but definitely to be prepared is the key word. The rest of the states out here, very minimal movement out in Texas, out in the oil fields. One small earthquake out here in the New Madrid seismic zone from earlier this morning. Far as the Puerto Rico area, still seeing some movement out here. The latest looks like a 2.3 and a 3.0 out here across the Puerto Rico region. Nothing big going on there for now. Let's see what else we got here across the circle globe. 2.9 up here across, I'm not for sure exactly where that's at. Is that France area? Let me see here. EMSC, where'd you go? 2.9. Oh, northern Italy. Okay, I was a little off. But, yeah, so a little bit of activity stirring up out there in this area of the world. Nothing going on out in the Atlantic for now. That's why we're seeing quieter conditions up here. But I expect when things kind of stir back up out here. Right now the sun's out here, right? Kind of potentially adding up to some gravitational pulling, so to speak, across this area of the globe in terms of plate dynamics here. I wonder what the relation is in terms of earthquake activity, large earthquake activity, facing the sun compared to large earthquake activity when it's not facing the sun. It's something to think about. I mean, it's kind of popped in my head quite a few times, but I really never mentioned it. But that could be a possibility. We'll have to look into historical data in terms of that, when these large earthquakes struck, and if they were facing the sun or if they were facing away from the sun. Because obviously I think, gravitational pull does play a part. And of course the moon has a lot to do with it as well. But that could turn into a 10-hour long video, and I really don't want to do that tonight. But there's definitely a whole lot in play in terms of, not only the dynamics of the convective activity below, creating the movement of the plates, but also the sun and the moon and whatnot. A lot of activity stirring up out here recently. All right, what else we got? Anything major going on in the space weather world? Right now, not a whole lot. Things are very calm across the area. Of course, we did see a little bit of M flare activity yesterday, a little bit of C flare activity earlier this morning, it looks like, but there's not a whole lot of flaring going on. We do have a coronal hole here facing Earth. Whether that's going to be sufficient enough to produce, some enhanced solar weather activity, that will be, I guess, forecasted once it gets reviewed. Right now, it doesn't look like we're seeing anything in terms of aurora potential. Sunspot activity out here continues to dwindle and dwindle and dwindle down. Me and Miss Mimi's were talking earlier. I took her out to dinner. About the potential here of strong solar weather events. Not only the Carrington event, but there's been some stronger, about 10 times stronger events here throughout Earth's history in terms of solar flare activity and the effects here on Earth. Now, we're so dependent, right? Electricity, internet, satellites, goodness. Something like that, like a super strong event today, would be dramatically not good for the inhabitants here on this planet, me included, because obviously I depend on the internet. But who's to say that we're not set up here for maybe a super large flare or Carrington type event? Kind of scary if you think about it, right? We are all dependent on everything right now in terms of satellite activity and internet and whatnot. Electricity could set us back into the Stone Age if we get something super big. But that's kind of not happening right now. We are in solar maximum, but this is kind of looking like maybe we might be done with solar maximum. I really haven't seen anything impressive here. Earlier this year, obviously, the solar cycle 25 progression here. This is the original forecast showing the peak around 2025, but the most recent experimental adjusted forecast calls for the solar cycle 25 to max out sometime next year, 2024, between I think it's March and October. But who's to say that earlier this year wasn't the peak? Kind of looks like it. We peaked up here well above the original forecast, and now we're just kind of going down. Who knows? Definitely interesting to watch, and we'll continue to watch it. Right now, solar flare activity, well, there's not a whole lot, and it doesn't look like there's a whole lot coming around the bend here either. Not a whole lot of dynamic setups here in terms of solar complexity in these sunspots. Storm Prediction Center out here. Do have a little chance of thunderstorm activity out here from that low pressure spinning off the coast there of California. Haven't got any thunder or lightning here, but we did get a lot of rain. Like I said, probably coming up on 1.5 inches here at my place here in Northern California. That activity should continue overnight, shifting down south into Southern California a little bit. Next storm looks to clip the... Well, I don't think Southern California is going to get involved. Looks like it's going to hit the Baja California area as we head into early next week. And things start to change, right? I'm sure you guys have been hearing a lot about some colder air coming down from the north, this Arctic air. It's very possible. As that jet stream is going to do a little bit of a maneuver here. Look at that cold air dipping down across the western portion of the states. Massive low pressure here over the Great Lakes area. Gonna have to watch this and see how much snow it brings out there to portions of the country. But either way, a little bit of taste of winter coming up here. That's outside of the normal Pacific jet that I've been watching here over the past month or so here in California, or winter. We've been watching these storms kind of come off the Pacific jet, which is this area right here. But I notice this high pressure starting to build in here, and that is going to see that jet stream. You can kind of see that warping of the jet stream right here going up and down right over Northern California, but bringing with it a lot of cold air from the north here. And those colder systems don't really bring a lot of rain here in Northern California, but it does enhance a lot of colder air from the north into the center portion of the country. So we'll watch that. I'm hoping that's just a little interruption. I really don't want to see high pressure off the coast here of California, because that would mean drier conditions here for the west coast, and I don't want it. I don't want to see dry conditions. It's our winter time. We're supposed to see rain, right? At least out here in the west coast. Current radar out here. Let me bring up the radar imagery here. There's that heavy band of rain. It's past me now. But yeah, we picked up probably a good 1.5 inches of rain, because this was pretty much south to north moisture. Look at this. Bring this up here, and you guys, well, it doesn't go back too far. Let me bring up the last 6 hours so you guys can see. And you'll see this line of moisture slowly move east, but watch this south and north. Look at this. Some decent heavy rainfall there into Northern California, and of course the Bay Area getting in on some moisture as well. The rest of the country, though, look at that. There's not a whole lot going on. So right now, kind of the story is going on here across the west coast. Still sprinkling outside. So we'll continue to watch this here, folks. We're getting a lot of earthquake activity here. A lot. They said about, 80 earthquakes here in the last 6 hours. I'm only seeing 51. But that doesn't mean that they're not reporting, that they're not issuing out all the earthquakes out here. But obviously we can see There is quite a bit of earthquake activity and some movement here across Japan. What's going on there in Japan? Those look like some S waves traveling. See this really wavy line here on that graph? That's got to be the S wave from that 5.9 out here in the northern Sumatra area. So odd earthquake activity out here. Very quiet across the western Pacific. Hawaii definitely straining out here in terms of volcanic potential. We'll definitely keep an eye on that and see if we get any fissure activity open up overnight. Crazy, all this activity kicked up, right? All this activity kind of kicked up following that 4.4, but they claim that it has nothing to do with volcanic activity. The earthquake appears to be a result of faulting on the onshore section of the Kīlauea Southwest Rift Zone. But here we are a day later seeing some elevated volcanic activity there across Kīlauea. So we'll continue to watch that and, of course, report back on anything that changes out there. I hope everyone has a good Friday night. Yellowstone, hard to say if that's earthquake activity or not. Still, it kind of looks like a little bit of movement there across Lake Yellowstone. We'll catch you guys back here tomorrow, Saturday morning, for our Saturday morning update, of course. New Year's coming right around the corner. I can't believe it. In about 2 days or so. Woohoo! Probably stay up till midnight. Count down the clock, right? New Year's resolutions. Anybody got any New Year's resolutions out there? It's kind of a thing I stopped doing probably 15 years ago or so. But it's always good to have, some positive type goals for the new year, I think. We'll probably chat about that as we head into New Year's Eve. We'll catch you guys back out here tomorrow morning. Stay safe out there, folks.